To me, it's about the story. If it's a story that interests me, and I realize, you know, being older and having made a lot of movies, that it's not going to be easy. It's very rarely easy. So it's really about a story that really interests me. I believe that if you have a good piece of material and you get the right filmmaker, you will attract a good cast. Good directors get good cast, but good material gets good directors. I came to Los Angeles in 1981 to enter the producing program at the American Film Institute. During that period of time, what was an interesting period of time because it was the very early stages of the home video business. Before that, all movies were controlled by the movie studios, historically, and the studios had a lock on it. And the only way to exploit the movies was on theatrical. The home video boom was going on, and my partner, Joni Sighvatson, and I started producing low-budget movies as line producers.
I met Steve, George, when we were both studying at the American Film Institute in the directing program. I met Steve, who was a producing fellow. We always ate the same breakfast, you know. It cost $1.99 at the time, at Venice here still on Sunset, because we didn't have a lot of money. We were going to school, so we hit it off, and he offered to be my producing partner on this project.
You know, make movies for $300,000 or $400,000 a movie, and then those movies would be distributed to home video and exploited that way. Nigel Dick was a director that I had produced a music video for probably like in '83. In fact, I produced a bunch of videos for him for Tears for Fears. And Nigel was actually a music video commissioner for Polydor Records in the UK, and he reported to Michael Kuhn.
I'd been working at Phonogram in the UK, which, as I mentioned, was part of Polygram. And as I was leaving the company, Michael Kuhn, who was head of Polygram Music Video, said to me, would you like to make a film?
They were looking to diversify because they realised they had all of their eggs in one basket, and it was all about music, and that they thought that filmed entertainment or creating visual content was a route that Polygram should go in order to diversify itself a little bit.
I said to Michael, if we're going to make this film, I think you need to meet Steve Golin and Joni Sighvatson.
And why don't you meet up with him and talk to him about it? And they've been doing a certain number of low-budget films. And I said, well, it can't cost more than, I think it was $800,000.
So Joni and I went to the Beverly Hills Hotel to meet Michael Kuhn, and we go to the Polo Lounge, and they won't let us in because we don't have any jackets. So they make us put on these horrible corduroy jackets that they have in the closet. And we go in, and we meet Michael Kuhn, and he tells us that he's really anxious to be in the movie business, that Polygram needs to not just be in the record business. And we met and we hit it off, Joni and I and he. And he had this idea that we would do these small movies.
So I wrote an idea. Steve and Joni helped me meet the writers, who were John Dahl and David Warfield.
I first met Steve Golin when I was going to the American Film Institute. And my writing partner and roommate, Dave Warfield, had met Joni Sighvatson. We worked on so many different ideas. The first script that we actually worked on and that we actually made, I think the movie was called PI, Private Investigation, directed by Nigel Dick.
I was very naive about filmmaking. I was certainly very enthusiastic. I'd stumbled into it. When I made Private Investigations, I was probably 33. I'd never been to film school. Both Steve and Joni had been to film school and had made short films, so they had way more experience than I did, and I needed all the assistance that I could get.
During the production of the movie, I was based in London and Steve was in LA, and I rang him on the first day to see how it had gone. And he said, well, okay, there were little problems. I said, like what? Well, the main actor got arrested. I was like, oh my God, what is that? Oh, well, he only got arrested for having some marijuana or something. I said, oh, well, can you get him out? Yeah, well, we could normally have got him out, but he was in breach of his previous conditions of parole. I said, well, what was that? Well, that was for heroin or something. And anyway, it was like a horrendous moment when you've never produced anything before, and your main actor's in jail with no prospect of getting out.
And we made the movie for like $300,000, and we sold it for $1 million. And it was lucky. It was just a good piece of business, the first thing out of the box. They made a bunch of money, and we worked really hard on it, and they liked us.
It turned out that MGM bought it for the United States and Goldwyn bought it for international. I think MGM bought it because they had some dodgy deal on home video and they wanted to put some rubbish film in so that they got the good films coming next, but we thought it was because our films were so brilliant.
And then after that process, we decided that we wanted to start our own music video company.
MTV had just come on in 1982, and the entire music business and the film business was trying to figure out how to do music videos. Producing music videos became an avenue for a lot of young filmmakers to get into that business.
So in 1986, Joni Sighvatson and I, Greg Gold, Nigel Dick, Dominic Senna, and David Fincher formed Propaganda.
I think we also did a little bit of work at N. Lee Lacy. I think maybe that's where they met David Fincher. They worked with Mark Friedman. It was really exciting to see Steve and Joni go from N. Lee Lacy, Mark Friedman, to creating their very own film company. And it was like film school, only the students were running the business. It was a really great environment.
Steve and Joni Sighvatson had this very interesting relationship with each other, where they were like twins. You know, if you could speak to one and somehow be speaking to the other. It was like they were married. You know, they had a joint bank account. If you did a job, they would AD the job together. So you would pick up the radio and you would talk to one of them on the phone and on the radio, and the other one would answer.
Basically, I ended up supervising the commercial and the music videos, and Steve moved more into supervising the features. We developed them together, but if a feature was greenlit, then Steve would go off and supervise that film.
At that time, MTV had a tremendous influence culturally over films. That was a period of Top Gun type of movies that had long extended sequences that resembled music videos. And also TV commercials were being tremendously influenced by music videos during that period. The whole paradigm of how advertising worked changed, and commercials started to look a lot more like videos. So during as early as '87, we would get a lot of incoming phone calls for our directors to do commercials that kind of looked like music videos that they had already done. And then we realized that there was a big business there. So kind of in the later '80s, we made a big commitment to getting into the TV commercial business. And during that whole period, there was a real transition. At that time, you know, we started to sign a lot of other directors. We had Spike Jonze, Michael Bay, Simon West, Anton Fuqua.
So Propaganda was the first company really where all the founders had film education. You know, Fincher had worked for Lucasfilm, Dominic Senna had gone to film school, Greg Gold had worked in film, Steve and I both went to film school. The only one that came from the record business was actually Nigel Dahl. So there was already a distinction in terms of approach that we considered as filmmakers that were just doing music videos until we could really move on and make films. So I think that was it was a big distinction which attracted other directors and other people to us.
We had many other good, bad or indifferent units that were set up. And by and large, the two most successful units we had were working title films, still going and successful to this day, and Propaganda.
Propaganda was making a lot of commercials, it was making a lot of music videos, and it was getting directors to make commercials and videos and then talking to them about making television and feature films. And in exactly the same way, I was talking to the directors that I was working with about making television and feature films.
During that whole period of time, our goal was to really use the revenue and the talent relationships from commercial and the video business to get in the movie business.
Started implementing the plan, which was to say, all right, how many movies can you make a year? How much development money do you need? This is what we need from you. This is how movies get green lit, and off you go.
And the way that Michael decided to do it was he thought it would be interesting to take a little strategic interest in a couple of companies that were already doing it with people who he kind of knew and he kind of respected. And so that in LA he did that with Propaganda. He took a strategic interest in Propaganda, which was Steve and Joni's company, and in the UK he did it with my company, Working Title.
And financially it wasn't the most successful entity. Working Title was always much better as far as financial return was concerned, but they were consistent, high quality, and very valued by the system.
Steve and myself and Eric and Joni, we were very close basically, because before it got too big, Michael would talk to us a lot about everything, and so we were all like independent producers with a bit of a sugar daddy basically, and we met up a lot. We talked all the time, about what we were doing, about the films that we were thinking of making, about strategically where Polygram might go. And so the first thing that we did together was we created a sales company, which was called Manifesto.
Well, I think what happens when you're making a volume of movies is you find your voice. It's like whether you're a writer or any kind of creative. It's not that you set off and say, I want to be Proust. Proust found his voice by writing, and he suddenly said, oh, this is me, I'm Proust, this is what I do, and you find your voice. And I think that Steve found his voice in sort of films that he made and continues to make.
We've mostly stayed in the low budget area. I mean, in all honesty, the high budget movies interest me less than the low budget movies. I'm much more interested on the movie side of making movies that I enjoy producing, stories that I'm interested in telling. And yeah, we obviously started out in the low budget side, and we have done some bigger budget movies. But I would say of all the movies that we've worked on, most of the movies have been in the kind of lower or mid-range budget.
Working Title, once they had a long period, much longer than Steve had, of failure. I think 4 years of nothing but flops. And suddenly, 4 Weddings and a Funeral. And 4 Weddings and a Funeral sort of set the tone. They suddenly tasted what it was like to make a big commercial blockbuster hit on a modest budget, and they thought, well, that's us, that's what we do.
6 or 7 years ago we decided at Working Title, for instance, to stop making films that were too low a budget, because they take just as much effort, and that they tend to go wrong, and quite often on a low budget film it's really, really difficult to get any traction on it commercially basically.
The idea of doing Hunger Games appeals to me on one level, obviously, but it's probably not Harry Potter, Hunger Games type of giant franchise movies. I think that those movies appeal to me personally to work on less than the type of movies that I've worked on. I'm more interested in doing movies that I would consider more alternative, although we will do mainstream movies if we like them, but I think my heart really lies in the type of movie like kind of Eternal Sunshine, Wild at Heart, Babel type of movies that I've worked on, Being JOHN MALKOVITCH, Red Rock West. I mean, when I think back of the movies that are the closest to my heart, I think those are the movies. The most exciting movie, I guess, in the early era was Wild at Heart, which was the David Lynch movie that we did. We shot in 1988, and then in, I think, 1990, it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. And that was not a tremendously successful movie commercially, although we did make money on it. It was an amazing experience to work with a director at the level of David Lynch.
Uh-oh.
David's very superstitious. When you go into a meeting with him at a studio to try to sell a movie or do something, he'll go around in the parking lot and he'll be looking for on the license plates of cars, and if he sees his initials on any of the cars, he thinks the meeting is going to be lucky. So you have to get to the meeting about a half an hour early and walk around the parking lot. So there's a famous restaurant in Hollywood called Musso and Frank's, and we used to go there for lunch about 3 days a week, me, Monty, David. So we go there, and David had just handed in the script to us, Wild at Heart. And so we were talking about what actor could play the part. And David said, well, Nicolas Cage would be really good to play the part. And then right when we were getting ready to leave, we were paying the bill, which David never has paid a bill in his life, so I guess I was paying the bill. And just as we got up to leave, Nicolas Cage walked into the restaurant, and David had a meltdown. He was so excited that, you know, he felt that it was fate. So he went up to Nicolas and told Nicolas, you know, that we were just talking about him and to be in this movie. And Nicolas basically just said, I'm in the movie, just call my agent, let me know when we're starting. I don't even need to read the script. So that was a completely crazy story. And it was really a lot of fun because Nicolas really embodied that character and had kind of an Elvis twist to it.
There was a German tax structure that Polygram had utilized to make some movies, and I believe that that might have been the first movie that Polygram did under that tax structure.
And I think also another film that was interesting was Portrait of a Lady that I did with Jane Campion. I think in some ways an underappreciated, beautiful movie.
A fortune. Lord Warburton has asked me to marry him.
I told you you'd be a success over here. Americans are highly appreciated.
Basically what happened was Jane was coming off the piano, we got the script, and you know, we didn't have any trouble casting it. Everybody wanted to be in that movie, and we pulled together that amazing cast. And working with Jane was very different than working with a lot of the male directors. I think Jane was the first female director that I worked with. I've worked with quite a few in the past after that, but she was the first one, and her approach was so different than most of the male directors. And most of the male directors that I had worked with had come out of music videos and commercials, which was a very different thing than where Jane came from.
I love Portrait of a Lady, and you know, that's not a movie, if I rattle off a list of movies that I made, that's not a movie that comes off the top of the list, but you know, in thinking about the Malkovich of it all, I go back to think about that movie, and I think there's so many things in that movie that are so beautiful, and it's such an interesting movie and complicated, and was not a commercial success and not even really a critical success, but I think that there's a lot of things in that movie, and I learned a lot from Jane. She's a fantastic filmmaker and a very difficult, stubborn person, and I think there are things in that movie that I wish were very different, but overall I'm really proud of that movie. So, you know, and Sleepers is a movie that wouldn't come off the list right away, but was a great experience, great learning experience. It was a big bestseller that we bought when I was at Propaganda, and I knew Barry Levinson from the past and had admired a lot of his movies, particularly the early movies, Diner, Avalon, The Natural. So I knew Barry pretty well, and I gave him the book and wanted him to adapt it and direct the movie. Generally speaking, I had worked with a lot of first-time directors or second-time directors that had come out of music videos or commercials, and a lot of those directors didn't have a lot of experience with actors. And Barry had been a writer and had a lot of experience with actors and had done a lot of theater and was an experienced writer. So I thought at that time in my career, in terms of my learning, it was going to be a great experience to work with someone who had a lot more experience than I had. It was the first bigger movie that I worked on. I think that movie cost $40 million, which at the time was a reasonable amount of money. And I had never been on a big movie like that before. I didn't know that much. And I really learned a lot from him. Yeah, and then we did The Game, which was a great experience too, to do a movie with Fincher. He had just come off the tremendous success of Seven, and I had been developing that script for many, many years, 6 or 7 years, in frustration of not being able to get it going.
The Game was a script that someone had submitted to me, and it was written by these two guys, Ferris and Brancato. And what happened on that was there was a guy attached to direct that movie named Jonathan Mostow, who had made a short film and was a very bright guy. And I got the material, and I spent a few years trying to get the film going with Jonathan Mostow. And I just, for whatever reason, we just couldn't get it going. We tried to get actors, we couldn't get the right actor, we couldn't get the right budget, we couldn't figure it out. And after 4 or 5 years of trying, I went to Jonathan Mostow and I said, listen, I think that the problem is that you need to make a smaller film before you make this big film. And I would like you to be executive producer, and I'd like to try to set the film up with another director. And John was very gracious about it, and I think he understood because we really tried to get the movie going for a long time. And then I gave the script to David Lynch.
Why are you following me? Find out about a company called Consumer Recreation Services.
They won't stop, Nick.
He's in on it.
I paid the bill. I paid him more to make it stop.
I need the police. We're gonna break into my house. I need voices of a bunch of depraved children. They're trying to kill me.
Who's behind this? Who did this to me? Why?
This is all the game.
That was, I believe that was the first movie that Polygram distributed domestically on their own. So it was exciting, and it was a big movie, you know. Michael Douglas was a big star, Sean Penn, and it was very exciting. And also, you know, just working with Dave was great because he so knows what he wants. He's so specific. He's so focused. And yeah, that was a really great experience also. And it went very smoothly. The production of the movie, Dave did a great job, and it was just a fun movie that I had wanted to make for many years, and was very frustrated, and the timing just worked out perfectly.
First tuned in.
It's not that I don't find you attractive.
Betty Sizemore has been in love.
I'm just not ready.
No, he's not ready.
With her favorite soap opera doctor.
I just know that there's something really special out there for me.
But when her husband cheated the wrong men.
Stupid is taking what doesn't belong to you.
Really stupid. She's in a kind of shock.
She went in search of the man of her dreams.
I just know there's something special out there for me.
What she doesn't know is that someone else is searching for her.
We could be dealing with a cunning, ruthless woman.
How are you gonna find him? Well, I'll go to the hospital. You must know him. Dr. Ravel is gentle and considerate. He's being sued for sexual assault. What?
Actually, Steve Golin is quite a centerpiece in terms of a turning point in my career. The first two films that I made were films that I both wrote and directed. The second one, Your Friends and Neighbors, was produced by Steve, by Propaganda. And Steve was working with another producer, Gail Mutrix, on this script, the spec script that she'd gotten called Nurse Betty. He came to me and said, what do you think of this? And actually, Gail really would love your input. She likes your writing, and would you just take a look at what these guys have written, and are you interested in helping them? I responded to the script and said, I really like it. Eventually, they said, well, we're gonna make this film. Are you interested in doing that? So the turning point was, am I going to only write and direct films that are my own, or will I direct other people's work?
You are in serious danger. Hey man, it's just an autograph. It's not for me. No, it never is.
I guess happily today, but kind of frustratingly at the time, Steve was a very good but firm producer who gave me very little time to think about it. He said, look, it's just, do you want to do it or not? I really need to move on this. I don't want to dance around. I like what you do. I think you would bring something to this, but you need to decide.
Dr. David Ravel, right? I think that she thinks that. Oh?
Nurse Betty.
It was one of those strange pictures. Propaganda was part of Polygram at the times. It was one of the sort of last films that company greenlit. So there was Nurse Betty, there was Being JOHN MALKOVITCH. So we were given a lot of freedom, I think, not just by Steve, but by the situation as well. But he knew what to do with that. He put it into the system at just the right time, and got those pictures greenlit, pictures that might have been very hard to greenlight for the amount of money that they were greenlit for, and got them made.
7.5, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome to the 7.5 floor of the Merton Plummer Building.
My name is Craig Schwartz, and I have an interview with Dr. Lester.
Please have a seat, Mr. Juarez.
My name is Schwartz.
My name is Schwartz.
Which of these two letters comes first, this one or this one?
The symbol on the left is not a letter, sir?
Damn, you're good.
Do you know that I don't even know your name or where you work?
And 50 other lines to get into a girl's hands.
So, honey, have you thought any more about us having a baby?
I think that maybe we should just wait and see if this job thing pays off. There's a tiny door in my office, Maxine, and it takes you inside JOHN MALKOVITCH.
There's no such thing as a hole into somebody's brain.
Yes, there is. You see the world through JOHN MALKOVITCH's eyes,
Yes!
and then after about 15 minutes,
That's not me. I didn't say that.
you're spit out into a ditch on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike.
It was amazing.
Where the hell are we? We're in Malkovich's subconscious.
Do you think that it's kind of weird that JOHN MALKOVITCH has a portal? I mean, do you think that it might have some sort of significance?
What is going on? Huh?
I discovered that portal.
It's my head!
John Cusack, Cameron Diaz, Catherine Keener, and John Malkovich.
Malkovich!
John Malkovich was a script that existed that I had read long before Spike gave it to me, but he gave it to me and he was really passionate about it. Obviously we needed John Malkovich, which was very tricky because he knew about the project. He had read it and he didn't really want to do it.
That was a movie that got made right at the end of Propaganda Polygram time. So we made that movie and no one wanted to make the movie. My ex-boss, Michael Kuhn, was like, I'm never going to make this movie. And through a lot of perseverance on a lot of people's parts, we ultimately got the movie made. And when the movie was finished, we normally with a studio, you tell them that you want to lock the picture and you screen the movie for them and they give you notes. And really nobody, because there was a lot of people who were getting fired at the time, nobody wanted to have anything to do with that movie. Everybody wanted to get as far away from it as possible.
My wife, who was in the sales and marketing side internationally at Polygram, for years used to give me absolute what for at night at home because Steve was so determined to make Being John Malkovich. And she said, you try selling that to the Koreans. You know, it's a pretty hard sell.
Spike and I had many phone conversations with John, but really in the end, Spike convinced him to do it. And the script that we shot is substantially different from the script that he brought to us.
And then we wanted to take it to the Venice Film Festival, and they didn't want it to go there. They thought that it was a bad idea, so, but we submitted it to Venice anyway, and it got in. And then we wanted to put it in competition, and they wouldn't let us put it in competition. They wanted it out of competition for some reason that I'll never know. And so we all went to Venice to screen this film, and the film was extremely well received in Venice, and it was a big hit. And then all of a sudden, everybody kind of came around on it and realized that it wasn't as big a mess as they thought it was, and you know, it kind of was relatively successful in its way.
In 1998, the Polygram level, some discussions with Philips, our shareholders at the time, who wanted to exit the entertainment business. They felt uncomfortable with it. They didn't feel it was what they were good at managing, and that was fine with us. So we said, all right, we'll try and help find an exit for you. And while we were trying to do that, behind the backs of the management, the then president of Philips had talks with Seagram and just rang up one day and said, I've sold you to Seagram. Obviously Seagram weren't interested in they owned Universal at the time. They weren't interested in the film operation, they were interested in the music operations.
They sold at the exact right moment. That the amount of money that Polygram was sold for was $12 billion. And all the record companies combined now probably have a value of less than 6. So that was really the beginning of the end of the record company, and they knew something that we didn't. They got out right in the nick of time.
But as part of that deal, after a lot of special pleading, they said, well, you've got a few months, you can see if you can try and sell the film operations, as we don't really need them. And it proved just too much. You just couldn't arrange it in such a short period of time. And so the company was sold, the film operations were merged into Universal, and all the board of Polygram, which I was one, were fired. Steve left, and then he decided to set up on his own with Anonymous Content, which was a big, brave step for him to do.
You know, Propaganda and Anonymous are very similar in many ways. He knew and knows that as producers we're nothing without the talent, basically, and that you really want, you know, which is a directing or writing talent.
You know, there's 22 talent managers, 22 assistants, so there's 44 just in talent management at Anonymous now.
You know, the advantage that Steve has over us living in Los Angeles and running the agency is he does have access to a great deal of writing talent, basically, and there's probably more film writing talent in LA than there is in London. There's sort of probably more diverse material at your fingertips.
We probably have 35 projects in development at any one time, and with a variety of different filmmakers, both from our management company, our commercial company, and externally. There are no rules. It's really about the material and the filmmaker are the key factors to us. Is a story that we want to tell with a filmmaker that we want to do it with, and then we, you know, will bend or break our own rules, bend over backwards to get the movie made. I mean, that's the producer's job.
There are people that I admire their movies a lot, and they're interesting to me, and I want to try to find something for them. You know, I want to see how they do it, and I really wanted to make a movie, I think, with all those directors, with Lynch, with Fincher, with Spike, with Michel.
You can't commit to
In some ways, my favorite movie, for a variety of reasons, is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's, I think, the one movie of all the movies that I worked on where if I could go back and change something, I wouldn't change anything. And it was not an easy movie to do logistically because Charlie Kaufman and Michel, you know, it created a world with rules that were unique to that world, which is challenging. And the movie was really a lot of fun, and I think probably the most complete movie. I think in all the other movies that I worked on, there were things that I would like to have seen done differently, and for whatever reason, whether it was the studio or the director or there was a problem that we couldn't solve. And that was the movie, I think, that for me was the most satisfying. It was a movie that I had an illness, and after the illness had kind of cleared up a little bit, I did that movie, so it was very satisfying to be able to go back to work. So there was an emotional aspect to that movie.
I'm gonna make them alive. I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours.
I remember that speech really well.
I had you pegged, didn't I?
Yeah, the whole human race pegged.
Probably.
I still thought you were going to save my life, even after that.
I know.
It would be different if we could just give it another go-round.
Remember me. Try your best. Maybe we can.
We usually develop as much as we can with our own money and with our own resources internally. So while we do that, then we control the creative, we control the elements, we control the cost, and what we try to do is get a really good script with a filmmaker that we want to be in business with, and then we try to put the actors and the budget together, put the package together, and then go out and try to raise the financing. That's our goal on every movie. And you know, we have a lot of time, money, and emotion invested in these projects. As you know, when you work on a movie for a year or more, it is a big chunk of your life, and there's a lot of personal parts of the movie. So we pretty much will do anything by hook or by crook to try to get the movie made. Winter's Bone is a really good example of a movie that we can talk a little bit about. It was a movie that was developed here that we wanted to do for $4 or $5 million, which was completely unrealistic amount of money for that movie because the director had only done one kind of Sundance movie and the cast was relatively unknown. So we tried to raise $4 million. We couldn't raise the money. And then after a period of frustration, we went back to the drawing board and we made the movie for, you know, roughly $2 million.
Mike Satterfield, A1 Bonds.
What is it you want?
We hold the bond on Jessup Dolly. He didn't show for court.
That ain't no run.
Jessup signed over everything. If he doesn't show at trial, see, the way the deal works is y'all gonna lose his house here and got someplace to go.
I'll find him.
girl. I've been looking.
I said I'll find him. Your son-in-law was out here hunting Jessup. You know where he's at? I wouldn't tell him nothing if I did.
We just had to, we had to rethink everything. We had to rethink it. I mean, first of all, everyone got paid a lot less money. We were hoping to take a little bit of a fee. The director was going to take a higher fee. The screenplay was higher. The actors were going to get paid more. I mean, we shot less days. We used cheaper crew.
$4 million was the wrong price for that movie. $2 million was the right price. And if we had $4 million, the movie wouldn't be any better. The movie is as good as it is at that level, and that's how we made it.
We just did a movie in the UK that called You Want Me to Kill Him, that Andrew Douglas directed, who's one of our commercial directors. And it was a very similar thing where we hoped to do it for $4 million. The movie stars two 16-year-old kids that are not known, and we just didn't have the ability to raise $4 million.
I'm better known as a commercial director than a film director. I don't have any value in the film marketplace. I couldn't really attract high-level talent, and I couldn't on my own attract finance.
So we wound up doing the movie for $3.1 million. We wound up putting our own money in. Andrew Douglas and the director Brian Singer, who's producing it with us, we all put in a bit of money.
He has a lot of connections in the independent film finance world. And so he was really invaluable in putting the finance package together for me for this film.
We would love to make movies and get paid as we make the movie, but when that's not viable, then we don't get paid. And in this case, we actually put our own money in. So we're very flexible about how we make our movies. I mean, the movies are really the reason that we're in business.
I think that the marketplace sometimes tells you what is realistic, and sometimes it doesn't. Obviously people make movies all the time and they lose money. I mean, what we try to do is make movies for as little as possible so that whoever the investors, whether the investors are ourselves or outside investors or a studio, that they have the greatest possibility of, recouping their money, because it's obviously nobody wants to lose money. And we just have to try to find the balancing act to make the best movie possible within the parameters that are achievable. And sometimes movies shouldn't be made because they cost more than they should. But generally, you're right. I mean, the budget is a key issue, and budgets have shrunk on these independent movies over the last 6 or 7 years, I think pretty dramatically. I think people are very risk adverse, and I think that, budgets are tighter, talent is getting paid less, and they have to participate on the upside more.
We have a number of movies that we're going to do. I think we're going to do The Revenant with Inarritu, which is a kind of a wilderness picture set in the early 1800s in Montana, based on a true story. It looks like that we're going to do that. We're doing a kind of a cop movie with John Hillcoat called 999, which is kind of a combination of The Town meets Heat type of movie, which I love that genre of movie. I love like cop gangster movies, the kind of older Cagney type of Warner Brothers movies. So we're going to do that movie this year, it looks like. We have a movie called Bloodfather with the French director Jean-Francois Richet that we're trying to get going. We'll see if that happens. So we've got 3 or 4 movies that might happen this year, and we're doing a TV series called True Detective with Cary Fukunaga, who's a management client here, who directed Sen Hombre and Jane Eyre, which is going to be an 8-part TV show that we're trying to finance right now, that we're packaging with actors, which is really an incredible piece of material written by a young writer named Nick Pizzolatto, who we manage. And it's a detective show, 8 hours, that we're hoping to do this summer in New Orleans. And Cary's going to direct it. I'm really excited about that.
The last few times that I've talked to Steve has been about television. We both, I think he at Anonymous, he's been interested in doing some television. The notion of being able to tell stories about one group of people as it expands and new people come into that relationship and tell 20 or 100 episodes of those lives are really interesting.
Now is another exciting period in the business, in the sense of television is very, very exciting creatively, and there's a lot of freedom, and there's a lot of different outlets. The way that home video opened up now with Netflix and Love Films and Amazon and streaming and VOD, it's a very exciting time to make movies that are artistic at all different price points and own the movie. And I think that there's going to be, the DVD business has obviously gone down substantially, but there's these other forms of revenue. Owning movies in the future is going to be very interesting. So our goal really now is to look at the business model and find a way to make movies that we care about, that are interesting, and that we can have some ownership in the movies. And that's really what we're up to.
How about that is described, Steve, in 3 words, not 3 sentences?
Funny, tenacious, warm.
Affable, creative, and he's passionate as well.
Talented, honest, and determined.
Provocative, funny, Jewish.
I think passionate, determined, and vulnerable.
Well, there are 2 that was already said by a lot of people.
Oh, good. The vulnerable.